If you don't know me, I'm co-host along with Robin Young of Here and Now, which started locally here at WBUR, Boston's NPR news station, in 1997. It had an audience of about 1.6 million. It was on 160 public radio stations around the country. And now, as of July 1st, and a new partnership with NPR, it's got an audience of 3.6 million, reaching 372 NPR stations across America. Thank you. But this session, of course, is not about Here and Now. It's about something that made a big difference to all of us who call Boston home. Our next group of speakers are a team that united together to create a Boston brand campaign like no other, the One Fund. Joining us first is Michael Sheehan, is chairman of Hill Holiday, which is the 12th largest ad agency in America. He served as chief executive officer between 2003 and 2013, and prior to that as president and chief creative officer. Also here today is James Gallagher. He is executive vice president, general counsel, and chief administrative officer for John Hancock Financial. He's responsible for John Hancock's legal and compliance operations, in addition to his involvement with government, public, and community relations areas. And last, but certainly not least, the Honorable Mayor Thomas M. Menino, elected 5 times as mayor of Boston, 5 times as city councilor from Hyde Park. He spent a lifetime building a better Boston for residents and businesses. And I should mention that today is the first full Monday in 20 years that he is not reporting for duty as the mayor of Boston. So please join me in welcoming Mike Sheehan, James Gallagher, and the Honorable Thomas Menino.
Good. Are you there? Thank you. You're here now. Thank you very much.
Mr. Mayor, you may not know this, but this is what all of us do every day while you're in the mayor's office. This is what life on the outside is like.
That was my first day on the outside. I've been in the mayor's office 20 years.
Well, I want to go back to, first of all, to set the scene of that day in April of this year and ask each of you what you were doing when you heard the news. Mr. Mayor, you first.
I heard the news about 2:50 in the afternoon. I was in the hospital, just been operated on. And my security came in and said, there's been an explosion at the finish line of the marathon. And I asked my security to get the police commissioner on the line right away and find out all the details of it. And some of my staff was in the room with me at the time. I said, okay, let's just calm down. Let's figure out what we have to do. And the commissioner called me, told me this situation. Then there's a second explosion down at the forum. And I said, we have to make sure that we're out there in the public, reassuring them that the city's in charge. The terrorists weren't. And I think then I went to the press conference with the governor.
Jim Gallagher, what about you?
Well, John Hancock is the principal sponsor of the Boston Marathon, so I was in my usual position on race day at the finish line and had left just before. I had my sisters were visiting from out of town and had lunch with them, and literally was driving back in the back bay when my phone rang, and furiously so, several calls coming in talking about what seemed to be a bombing, and so made my way to our operations station at the Copley Plaza Hotel to begin the work of finding out where our employees were and what the situation was.
And you had a lot of people in those stands right in the front, right?
We have people there, guests. We have hundreds of employee volunteers, 100 employees who were running the race. Really the rest of the day was spent accounting for everybody. Unfortunately, 2 of our employees were very seriously injured in the blasts. And we're grateful that they are healing, but you can imagine the trauma.
Mike Sheehan, what about you?
I was actually at Mass General. My father was sick at the time and a patient there, and I was visiting with my wife and 2 kids. And I was in the cafeteria when it came up on my phone, explosion at the marathon finish line. And my immediate thought in my head was, like propane tank on a rooftop, a grill. I'd never thought it never crossed my mind there would be something like it was. But within minutes, I went upstairs, we knew what it was. So by the time I got upstairs, the cafeteria is in the basement of Mass General. By the time I got upstairs, there were people telling, because it was about, around the shift change, telling nurses not to leave. And I knew something, you could tell something really serious had happened. And then I went upstairs to my father's room, saw it on TV. And then it was interesting to walk into the hospital on just a beautiful April day, and then leave with 2 kids explaining what had happened, with a SWAT team being escorted out of the hospital. It was a crazy day.
By the way, Mr. Mayor, did you think it was a terrorist attack right away?
I didn't know what to think. I had no idea. I was looking for information. And my concern was the people that were at the marathon, also the volunteers and the police, what they were doing, and how we're taking care of the injured. That was my biggest concern at the time.
So at what point did you guys start thinking about, and you first, something to give the victims, a fund for the victims? When did that come into your mind?
That came Tuesday morning. I said...
The next day?
The next day I said, we have to set up some kind of fund for these victims. And I called Michael, I called Jim, and that's how the one fund started. Originally, when we started, we thought we could collect $12 million for electrical. We collected $61 million the first time out. It's been unbelievable how people have given to this fund. And we haven't solicited 1 penny. Everybody's just come forward to help out. This event, it really has affected a lot of people. A lot of people want to be involved in it, want to help out. And I just say that his creativity, John Hancock's financial backing, and other corporations, Boston, is stronger today than when it went in.
Well, Jim, tell us about when you got that call from the mayor that something had to be done here.
Well, when the mayor calls, first of all, you answer and then you get busy. But there was an immediate understanding, I think, of the urgency at hand. And then Mike was a recipient of similar messaging, and we got underway right away. There was no need to worry or wait for the messaging about the urgency at hand. We understood that firsthand. Again, we knew 2 of our own employees were grievously injured, so we understood the magnitude that was unfolding and a small sense of what was to follow for a long time to come. We have very young people who were horribly injured and 4 young people killed. So we knew what the demand should be.
Well, so 10 a.m. that call happens, right? 10 a.m. Tuesday morning?
Yeah.
And you're on that call.
Yes.
And what was said? What needed to be done?
Well, from a lot of agency people here, the number one thing we had was a deadline, which is the most important thing. And the mayor was very simple about a deadline. He said, I'm going to announce at 5 o'clock tonight the formation of a fund. I've scheduled a press conference. Good luck, fellas.
No pressure at all.
Yeah.
So it was actually very simple, and so we knew we had to do it fast. And on the phone call, when we were discussing, it was a conference call, and when we were discussing it, I recalled a meeting that I had had in my office maybe a few weeks before by a gentleman from the agency who was raising money for Newtown, Connecticut. His mother had been at Newtown, And I remember asking him, which fund in Newtown is this for? And by the time he was done explaining, I was so confused. I remember thinking to myself, this must really hurt their fundraising if it's so broken up, fragmented, and diverse like that. And so I was kind of on this phone call that morning, I was remembering that. And so while I was on the phone call, I knew the name of it had to be, it had to be the one and only one, something like that. So I had the idea on the phone call as to what it had to be. And then it was a matter of anyone unfortunate enough to walk by my office. And the next 15 minutes was called in, and we figured it out. And it took 15 minutes to design the logo. While someone was designing the logo, somebody was on my desktop searching for names that we could own and buying them, buying domain names, just anything around One Fund Boston, One Fund Boston Inc., .com, .org, .everything. We bought them all up and we owned them. And so then we had a name, we had a logo.
By the way, how long would it ordinarily take to design a logo?
Generally, it's
Mike, remember
should be about 6 to 8 weeks.
There you go.
Between $1 million and $1.2 million.
There you go. That's what
in that range. I'm a little behind the times. That could all be a little low and fast. But it was James Adami. He was a terrific designer. He actually just left the agency to become head of design for Cadillac for the marketing, and he was the one unfortunate enough to be going by my office, and he said of all the things that he will have designed in his career, the one that might be the most iconic he did in 15 minutes. But it was great. It was there it is. It's just he did a really nice job, and it was perfect.
Why those colors?
We went on my computer and looked up the bib. That's what the bib looked like, the marathon.
Right.
And we knew that this was not. We wanted it to be to reference the marathon, but not say marathon in it, because
why not?
It was a broader event than just a marathon. I mean, I think these people were looking for a crowd in Boston to do this, and so we wanted to make sure it wasn't. That it didn't say that, but it certainly implies it's strong enough.
Yeah, Boston was attacked.
Yeah.
Not the marathon.
Yep.
Mr. Mayor, what did you think when you first saw this or heard of it? The One Fund.
Well, the name One Fund, when Michael said to me, One Fund, that hit me right away, because a lot of organizations were calling, we want to set up a fund, we want to set up a fund. And we knew the history of other cities when they had disasters like this, had several funds, and money was dispersed all over the place. Nobody got anything. We wanted to make sure the money came in and went out as quickly as possible. I think we got the money out in 8 weeks.
It was less than 90 days. $61 million.
$61 million. And we got it out to all the survivors of the marathon. And what I thought was, we got to do something for these folks. This was an act of two crazed individuals. The city had to say, we're going to be here to help you. We're not going to walk away from you. And that's what we did. The city, everyone. I mean, I tell you, from John Hancock right down to the $5 giver, they all gave over a couple 100,000 people have given to the One Fund.
200,000.
Gets all the numbers, doesn't he?
Because I've always been a numbers guy.
No, but yeah, over 200,000 people have given, all over the world, too. And they're still giving. They're still giving to the One Fund. And it's helping so many folks. And these survivors have meetings so often, talking with each other. They have dinners where they talk with each other also. They keep very close contact with each other. So it's built a bond within themselves.
Mike talks about the confusion about Newtown and all the funds. Is it something that you as a mayor know from talking to other mayors that you shouldn't have more than one fund in something like this? Did you talk to the mayor of New York, for example, after 9/11 about this sort of thing?
Well, 9/11, they had federal money.
Right, federal money came in.
And I talked to some of the folks in some of those other localities, and they said, well, you have this group wants to have a fund, that group, and I said, and as mayors, you have to make a decision right away. And we made that decision. I said, one fund. We had some arguments with some people, let me tell you, who wanted to start their own groups. And we said, no, There's one official organization in the city of Boston. And some people didn't like it. But we knew the only way to get the job done is to have one place money to be sent to.
And one of the things that was crucial in those early hours was a $1 million contribution from John Hancock Financial. Jim, tell us about that, because you were the one who got that, right?
Yeah, and that really, that wasn't a tough thing to do. For us, and again, it was personal. Our own employees had been injured. Our own employees were in the midst of all the chaos and fear. And we had a sense of the magnitude of the problem. And $1 million was something we thought would first telegraph what would certainly become enormous need, and secondly, try to be a responsible civic leader, particularly as the principal sponsor of the marathon. We wanted to demonstrate that kind of civic leadership.
And do you think, because I've seen written that if it were a $50,000 contribution, wouldn't have made near the same impact?
Yeah, I think that's right. But I think Mike's got better analysis.
That's harder for him. That's hard for him to answer. I have no doubt in my mind that first gift of $1 million is why the largest survivor relief fund in U.S. history is $12 million, and we're at about $72 million now. And there's no question in my mind that that's a result of that first $1 million gift, because people followed. Bain Capital, AT&T, Liberty Mutual Partners, and New Balance all followed $1 million gifts. And Jim says that that wasn't tough to do, but $1 million donation from a corporation, that's a material gift. That's something the board of directors is aware of. It's not an immaterial donation.
That's true.
That is real deal stuff to get that kind of approved. But everybody followed that lead. And if it wasn't money, there were the donations of time and help were also, it was unbelievable. So many companies gave money. I guarantee you that most of you work for a company that did something to help.
Yeah.
Bank of America, major donation, and they donated the back room to get the work. So this is a fund made up of people who've never done this before, and we're receiving checks the next day, a 5 foot by 5 foot by 5 foot stack.
Well, yeah, in fact,
Cash.
your chief of staff, Mayor Menino, set up a P.O. box that wasn't big enough, right, to handle everything that was coming in.
That's right. He was a bag man.
He was a bag man.
He went over there and picked up the checks every evening. And when the first night he went over there, he said, "I can't believe how many checks I have." It was unbelievable. Two whole satchel full. The next day. These are often little people out there who want to be part of it. And that was so special that those folks out there who really didn't have much gave a lot.
Now, why does a P.O. box have to be set up? Why can't people just send things right to City Hall or something like that when something happens this way?
Sending cash to City Hall?
No.
Maybe first term.
You don't pay for that.
Yeah.
Mike, you mentioned getting the domain names registered and getting the logo put together, but there were a lot of other things that had to be done in those early hours. Tell us about some of those, and some of the partners that you had to work with.
We had to set everything up, which and so the digital team at the agency, it's interesting. I read a great piece, if you have any time, that Dr. Atul Gawande wrote in the New Yorker after the bombings on April 17th. But he wrote a piece in the New Yorker, and it was about why Boston hospitals were ready. It's a wonderful piece. But there's a quote from the head of emergency at Brigham and Women's that said, "We just let everybody do their job. All right, everyone knew how to do their job, and they just did it." And I think that's how it happened. That there was a job to do. Everyone sat down and did it, and the site was operational. We got help from Bank of America, PayPal, everybody, MasterCard, Visa. We had to do all this in 7 hours.
Goodwin Procter. Right?
Goodwin Procter, the law firm, had the articles of incorporation done within 24 hours. It was unbelievable. And Goodwin Procter to this day has easily absorbed over $1 million in legal fees in getting this done, because it's been an enormous job. And so it literally is, everyone just did their job and did it well.
Mr. Mayor, as the chaos of the week is unfolding, this is Tuesday, how big of a part of your job is this fund? Where does this rank in the things that you're concerned about getting done?
Well, the fund was very important, but my job as mayor was excuse me, to reassure the public that the city was not under siege. That was my job. The fund just kept on coming in. And, we did a couple of press conferences with the governor. But the real issue that I had and the governor had was to go out there and talk to people and saying, it's okay, folks. We have these two individuals, we believe, and we know we're looking for them, but the city is not under siege at this time. We had to give them confidence that we were in control of the city. That was the most important part of that week. And I think we did that very well. And the public cooperated with us the whole week.
The fund had $10 million in the bank by Friday of that week. How do you decide where to send the money? And I'll let any of you pick that up.
Well, the mayor appointed Ken Feinberg, who many of you would recognize his name. He'll tell you that he hopes he never has this kind of work ever again, but he's been called upon to do it, what?
4 times.
4 times, and he's longtime associated with Senator Kennedy's office, a very astute lawyer in Washington, but a native of Massachusetts, Brockton. And he has worked with victims' funds in a number of different communities across our country, so he has, fortunately for us, learned a lot about the puts and takes on what goes on in those circumstances, but unfortunately, probably for him, it's probably not a pleasant exercise. He used those skills and helped us through including community meetings, public town hall meetings that were held, to design a protocol that would be used to kind of rank and order for who among the victims and then the survivors would get the most funds. And we utilized that protocol. It was published and certainly discussed thoroughly with the public before it was used. That I think he'll tell you that it was a rough kind of justice. Nothing's going to be perfect. But remember, the exercise was to get this money in the hands of people who urgently needed it right away. Get rid of the bureaucracy. Don't install that. Get it done as fairly as you can. And I think we accomplished that.
Also, Ken was instrumental in helping the One Fund get its 501c3 status with the IRS, which is not an easy exercise. It was difficult. In defense of the IRS, I can't believe I just said that. But in defense of the IRS, this is not their definition of a charity. A charity benefits a broad number of people, all right? Where this really is focused on roughly 250 people with gifts up to $2.2 million, which they don't have to pay taxes on. So Ken was instrumental in helping us navigate that, but just in a matter of days. And it usually takes months. And he was absolutely expert in doing that. And that's expertise we didn't have. We didn't have that.
Isn't there a risk, though, if you're trying to get things out as quickly as possible, that you don't take into account perhaps the long-term effects, people that are injured whose injuries aren't apparent right at the beginning?
Well, we're faced with that now. We wondered at the time whether this fund would just be a fund that gathered money until July 1st and had that dispersed entirely, in which it was. 61 million had been collected by the end of June. 61 million without the deduction of 1 cent for cost went out to the survivors and the victims' families. But since that time, another 11 or 12 million dollars has come in. And we know that more fundraising is underway, particularly as the Boston Marathon 2014 approaches. And so we are working with the survivors and their families to understand potential long-term needs. We're going to have a panel of medical experts assist us, and we'll make different decisions about how that's dispersed going forward.
Mr. Mayor, I'm sure you've talked to many victims who received money from this fund. Do you remember the first conversation you had with somebody who was actually given money from the one fund and what kind of a difference it made for them?
Well, they're not victims, they're survivors.
Yeah.
And these survivors, said if they didn't have the one fund, they wouldn't be able to get the medical service they did. But not just the medical service, but also we had lawyers there to help them with the financial situation. Getting $2 million, how do you handle that? We held financial folks. But also the groups that came together on this incident, they meet every so often and talk with each other without the media at all. They just want to speak to each other and explain what's going on and some of the agony they go through, some of the joys they have. And that's what it's all about. These folks are the most courageous individuals I've ever met. I've been with them. I was in the hospital when it happened. I went upstairs and visited some of the survivors. They were so courageous and so upbeat. And we just helped them out a little bit. They got a long road to hoe. And that's why Jim and Mike and the other folks, that other funds we're going to have, we're going to figure out how we make sure they have funds out there for the future. That's so important. We gave them the initial amount, but what's there for the future? Because some of these folks have long-term issues to deal with.
Well, with the mayor, it's amazing, and I've been surprised, because we meet with the survivors fairly regularly. The support they have for each other is amazing. I've certainly heard more survivors say, the next round, think of somebody else besides me. And it's amazing how they're thinking of the others. Particularly, the mission of the fund is to help those most affected by the tragic events of the week of April 15th. And it's amazing how the survivors themselves are looking out for each other. And I gotta be honest, I'm surprised by that, given what they've been through. These people have every reason in the world to be angry and to be bitter because their life was, as they knew it, was taken away from them, many of them. And they had to rebuild new lives. But it's unbelievable how supportive they are of each other and how appreciative they are of the generosity of 200,000 people around the world.
Jim, your thoughts on that?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, we have a lot of survivors that are very young, and so the needs will go on for a long time. And we know we have a committed large base of people who are interested in helping them. They've already shown their generosity, and they continue to do so. So we at the One Fund are working to make sure that we're there to help distribute that money to the needs directly from the donors in the most efficient way possible. And that we are transparent in doing so. We will provide public reports that detail everything about contributions made to the fund, expenses. Now, since the time we gave the first $61 million distribution, we are incurring some expenses, but we're going to keep that to a minimum. So we're going to have that transparency, and we're going to be a vehicle that gets urgently needed funds to people who desperately need it.
How many people working on the fund right now?
There is a staff of 3 people.
3 people. And do you expect that as the marathon approaches this year, you're going to have another flood and will you have to
It's starting, I don't know if it's a flood, we're going to find out what it'll be, but we know more is coming in. But in addition to the 3 staff members, we have literally dozens of volunteers. Volunteers who work in city government, in our companies around the community, and just other private interests, individuals coming along, volunteering to work with the One Fund, their personal time. It's incredibly gratifying to see that generosity.
On Here and Now, I work with a staff of about 17 producers, and there are certain people that I know I can say, do this, and they'll give me exactly what I'm looking for, and there'll be no problem. They'll be able to execute. When you're trying to do this in such a short period of time, do you have the people that you know you can rely on? Did you send anybody out with a task in those 7 hours, and somebody came back and said, sorry, I can't do it?
If I could, Mike has a great way of talking about this, and it's about the trust built over a long period.
The way that it happened that quickly, everyone talks, it happened in 7 hours. But it didn't happen in 7 hours. It happened in 20 years. Because that's the time that Mayor Menino was in office, and now he's going to smirk, right? That's the time that he was in office, that he built the relationships and got to know everybody in the community, and he knew how to put a team together on a 5-minute phone call. Right? You don't do that. And it's nothing about 7 hours. This is about the mayor building an incredible team internally, but also having incredible relationships with the business community. There are a lot of mayors around the United States who run for office being antagonistic towards the business community. Mayor Menino has never been antagonistic towards the business community. He realizes how important it is and what an important partner the business community is. So it didn't take 7 hours. It took 20 years of incredible hard work and dedication and sacrifice on Mayor Menino's part. And we owe him an incredible debt of gratitude in doing that. And it was a joy to work for him.
Mr. Mayor, your thoughts on that? If you had been a brand new mayor, would you have had a more difficult time putting this together?
Well, it wasn't a brand new mayor. Yes, you would. Like Mike said, the word trust is so important. People have to trust you in your judgment and what you want to do. You build up that trust, you get almost anything done. This business community of Boston that I've had for 20 years is probably the best business community in the country. I talk to mayors all the time, and they can't believe some of the things we've done because of our business community working with us. Because, you know, it's not us against them. They're both in the same business of promotions. They're promoting their business, we're promoting our city. And over the 20 years, I've always tried to help the business community grow because it goes into jobs, the economy, all that stuff. But it was the trust, I believe, that I built up over 20 years. Now, I don't know if I'm talking about myself, but that is all about trust. And Mike's right. And we did that within a matter of hours. Like, other mayors called me and said, how did you do it? We can't raise $100,000. Well, because, you know, they believed in what we're doing was right. I mean, Mike and Jim and some other folks who were behind us, they did it all. I came up with the idea. They did all the work.
Since then, you've said, other mayors have said, how did you do this so quickly? What do you tell them? What lessons do you tell other cities, not just about what went right, but also whether anything went wrong?
Well, I tell them, first of all, you have to have a real purpose that people believe in. People just don't give to just because it's give. They want to see what it's about and how they can make a difference. That's the key to this thing. They saw that there was innocent individuals who were hurt, and they wanted to help those individuals get another start. I told the mayors as they called me, you know, you just can't do this for political purposes. It's not about politics. It's about people, helping people rebuild their lives. So if you're thinking of political mileage out of it, get out of the business. Think about it's a problem you have, and how you get people engaged, how you get them to help, and how you help those survivors have a better life. And that's what it's all about. It's not about me politically or Mayor X politically. It's the city, it's the incident that happens there. And I just say that in this city, people who work those tents, they're the superstars. You know, the docs of the emergency rooms, they're the superstars. They're the one that made it happen. They really did. I mean, it was just amazing. I was supposed to be in the hospital. Doctors didn't like the idea. I walked out. I didn't walk out. They carried me out. But I had a little issue with them. But I saw it all, and I'm so proud of what happened. So proud of how Boston reacted that day to a very serious situation.
My dad's doctor at Mass General is the same doc who's head of the emergency mobilization at Mass General. And so I was talking to him probably about 7 o'clock that night. And he said he thought they were going to lose 12 to 14 people that night at Mass General. And they lost nobody. That's how great the healthcare system is in Massachusetts. And they lost nobody at the Brigham. They lost nobody who went to a hospital. That's an unbelievable credit to the healthcare network that we have in Boston.
Jim, lessons learned?
Well, I think the lessons learned, the first one really is the one that the mayor and Mike talked about, which is building relationships and building trust in those relationships. In all of our lives, in big and small ways, you get faced with crisis of one kind or another. And when you have that, if you have the trust of others who will come to your aid in the crisis, your chances of rising above that crisis are a lot better. If you cannot call upon that trust, you've got tougher rows to hoe. So I think that really is the first message. I think the second one for us is just a reminder of what it means to commit yourself to working with your community. Look, for us at John Hancock, the children in our schools today are the ones that we hope are our employees tomorrow. And so we want to be part of shaping their future, because in many ways you could say that's selfish. They're going to help build our business in the future. It's a two-way street. So this has been a reminder of that two-way street.
Mike, if somebody were to call you in a similar circumstance now and say, you did this so quickly, you did it so well, what should we do? What would you say about things that you did right and things that you didn't?
It's interesting because I've been called twice, something in Arizona, something in Colorado, from someone doing a fund. And they say, we want to do something just like the One Fund. And the first question I ask is, I say one of the reasons the One Fund was so successful is because in the first 90 days, $61 million, we had zero expenses, not one nickel of expenses, which is met with silence on the other end of the line. And I said, if you want to be successful, you've got to get the volunteers and you've got to get the community involved, and you've got to make it a public-private partnership. People are very cynical about the role of government. This was a perfect, or close to perfect, public-private partnership. But that's because, again, of the mayor's leadership. All right, so if you want to do it again, get people in office who can build trust and can be trustworthy and can work their butts off for the constituents. Mayor Menino did this from a hospital bed. Think about that. All right? No podiums. No. He did it from a hospital bed. And if that's what you've got to encourage, if people to run for office who have that capacity, and will build that kind of trust, and will work with the business community to be successful. And in that case, there's no reason why you couldn't do this everywhere in America. Hopefully you don't have to.
Have you pulled any lessons from this toward non-tragedy related events and how to make things work in the rest of your business?
It was a great lesson for me, and just let people do their job. John Running, who was a head technology at the agency, came down and he just walked away and got three team members together and did this in 7 hours. And I think that's a great lesson. Don't tell people what to do. Tell them what needs to be done. And you may not be surprised at how they come back and do it. And the other thing is, I've never had anybody say no, they wouldn't help for anything. So $61 million goes out, not one nickel of expenses, all right? So you're wondering, where did the copier come from? Where did the paper come from? Where did the desks, where did this? Everything was donated. The folks at Partners, because we were in the Pru, the folks at Partners couldn't find a stapler, a pencil, a pad of paper, or a pen for about 3 months because we took everything. My cousin works at NSTAR, and we had, Mitch not comfortable having a 5 foot stack of checks, cash. And so the NSTAR gave us their safe overnight to put things in. There's nobody we called. PwC gave us 6 volunteers a day. All right? And then, when you have to administer this, you start, all of a sudden, the fund's at 10, 20, 30, $40 million. A gentleman raises his hand and says he'll help, and it's Paul Conley. All right? Paul has recently retired as the COO of the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston. And he goes, I've got some time. I'll help for 90 days. So we're in a situation where we're accepting wire transfers from 50 different countries. We don't know how to do that. It really helps to have the former COO of the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston raise his hand. And a Manulife board member or a Hancock board member as well?
Yes, he is. Yeah.
Raise his hand and say, I'll help. That's how, I would say lucky. That's how fortunate we were to have people like that raise their Ernst & Young. Everybody has raised their hands to help. And there's been nobody I've asked for anything has said no.
Jim, John Hancock's brand is so associated with the marathon. How does this change that at all? Or what kind of an effect does it have on that?
We are eager to really make sure that the marathon goes on about being the Boston Marathon. We recognize that in this year there are some very important processes that we all have to go through as a community, as the survivors, and we need to do this together, and we certainly are going to be there in helping that happen. And for years to come, no doubt, in the Boston Marathon, tributes can be expected to be paid. But for us, it is important that this race goes on to be the world-famous race that it is, but it will be imbued with a spirit of tremendous care and concern for each other that perhaps it never would have had before. And if that's the legacy that gets added to it, that'd be wonderful.
Mr. Mayor, what would your message be to the city as we prepare now? We're only, 3 months and a couple of days away from the marathon. A year later, how should we experience it this year?
I think this year's marathon, the public just go about what we've done in the past. We'll have all the so-called security, but just enjoy it. It's the best weekend of the year. And this event should not ruin that weekend. It'll be a little more crowded than it was in the past. Have 36,000 runners. But I just say, come to Boston that weekend, enjoy yourself. It's a fun weekend. The only problem is everybody's in that race is too skinny for me. That's the only problem you have, walking around all these skinny people. My God. You're out of place. But just come to our city. We're ready for it. I know they started planning on this marathon in August for next year. They're hiring staff to work on it now. It's going to be a great, great weekend. It's not even 1 day. It's 3 days. And just come to Boston. We'll show you a good time.
Well, Mayor Menino and Jim Gallagher and Mike Sheehan, thank you so much to all of you.
Thank you. Thank you.